Hello everyone, Jules here. Today I'd like to talk about quite an interesting book that was published earlier this year. That is the Books of Enoch Revealed by Tobias Churton. And the subtitle of the book is The Watchers, Metatron and the Fruits of Forbidden Knowledge. And Tobias Churton has written quite a number of books over the years on esoteric subjects, and this is his second book about Enoch. And I actually prefer this book because this book covers a wider variety of information and ties the history of the Books of Enoch with later developments of esoteric philosophy. So I actually prefer this book. So I wanted to talk about this today. I wanted to talk about what's in this book. And I think this is a great book for people who would like to know more about the Books of Enoch and how the Books of Enoch tie in with later esoteric philosophy. So there's some really good photographs in this book, and I just really like the way all of this information ties in. So I'm going to talk about what's in the book. Now, one of the most really interesting things about the Book of Enoch is this book was not very well known in the Western world, and it was actually discovered in Ethiopia, of all places, and it was actually part of the Bible of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and it was actually held in high regard by the Orthodox Church of Ethiopia. And otherwise, in other parts of the world, the book is unknown. It was unknown until it was discovered by Westerners. And this really ties in with other Gnostic types of discoveries and books that were left out of Bibles and were really suppressed because this type of scripture is really seen as Gnostic, and it's just too different and it's not conventional. So part one of the book talks about Ethiopia and how it was discovered, and then it starts to go into the Book of Enoch. Now, there are 3 books of Enoch, but the first Book of Enoch is the original one, and it's the oldest one. Books 2 and 3 were later books, but the book 1 of Enoch is the most important one, and that's the one that is known for its Gnostic and esoteric stories and information. So there's a very good introduction in here by the author, and then it starts first of all talking about after the discovery in Ethiopia, it talks about the first Book of Enoch and the chapters 1 to 5. It talks about the Book of the Watchers, and it talks about the later chapters that have dream visions, chapters 83 to 90. And there is also an Epistle of Enoch, which is chapters 91 to 105. And there is an astronomical book. This is the reason why the Book of Enoch, the first book, or Enoch 1, is the most important in regard to esoteric thought, and all of the later connections with Enoch, all of the references to Enoch come from the first book of Enoch. And there is also a fragment from a book called the Book of Noah, and that is chapters 106 to 107. So even Noah is mentioned in the first book of Enoch. The next part, because this is all divided into different parts in the book, the next part goes on to Book of Enoch 2, which is the later book. And when I'm saying later book, these are later writings that are not really part of the original first book of Enoch. So in Book 2, or Enoch 2, you have Parables of Enoch, and then it goes on to talk about all of this in relation to Qumran, and this is all to do with the Essenes. And the author talks about connections with the Enoch and the Essene hypothesis. So this book is really important. The way that this author has approached this topic, it's really important because he's talking about relevant connections, right, that haven't really been thought of before, but not all in one book, tying everything together. So talking about the Essenes and the Enoch similarities and connections is a really good comparison to make. Then the next part goes into the Book of Enoch's reception in history, and this is all about how it then influenced history from then on. And another really interesting part of the Book of Enoch as well is called the Book of Jubilees. That's really interesting. Now, when I'm talking about these books, the first Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, you can get copies of these books. So anyone who wants to look into getting the first Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees, you can get these books and you can read them for yourself, and you can look at these books and you can decide whether you think these connections are there and whether they're relevant to each other. And then in the second Book of Enoch, it talks about 10 heavens, and also where there is a Coptic connection as well. And then when you get further along in this part 3, which is Enoch's reception in history, it then talks about the figures of Zosimus, Enoch, and Hermes. So here you're talking about the connection particularly between Hermes and Hermeticism and Enoch. So that again is a really important comparison, and just having a look at the connections and how the influence of Enoch seems to be in the background of early Hermetic writings and later Hermetic writings. Then it talks about Enoch 3, which is Book 3. Book 3 is more of a Hebraic Book of Enoch. So this is where it's talking about Jewish mysticism and Enoch and Metatron and macabre mysticism. All of this in regard to Metatron and Enoch. Then the next chapter goes on to Enoch in medieval Islamic traditions, and that is really quite unexpected, really. So, I mean, when you are thinking about these connections and how widespread they are, it really does cover a lot of ground in esoteric thought. So this is why this is a really good book, because it's tying everything in together, and it's tying everything in historically. And the next chapter is Enoch and the Renaissance, and this is where it really comes to the fore. Because this, when once Enoch is the Book of Enoch is having influences in Renaissance thought. That, of course, leads later into the Elizabethan period with John Dee and the Enochian magic. And it was John Dee who actually created the concept of the watches in regard, the 4 watches in regard to the circle of magic. And this is all based on the Book of Enoch. Then the next chapter goes on to Rosicrucianism with Flood and Robert Flood and Freemasonry. And this is where the first commentaries on Enoch, which dates back to 1710. This is where it really starts to influence Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry. So I just love the way this book just covers all of this historical relevance, and there is a timeline, a really great timeline in the back of the book. It's really useful as well. Then the next chapter, the last chapter of part 3, you have got the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and Aleister Crowley, because Crowley also created his own Enochian magic. Then part 4 is another interesting connection again, because this part 4 is talking about Enoch and Christian origins. And by origins, it really means a connection between the Book of Enoch and Christian scripture. So you have got information here about Enoch, the priesthood, and Jesus. And this is all to do with also tying in with Hermeticism again. Then you have another chapter on, a further chapter on Enoch and Christian origins. And I haven't really seen this before. I have seen a connection between Enoch, the Book of Enoch, in regard to magic, particularly John Dee and Crowley. But I haven't seen this, and also Hermeticism, but I have never seen this, I haven't never seen it mentioned, for example, the Enoch in medieval Islamic traditions. I've never seen that before. And I've also never really seen this mentioned in regard to the discoveries of Qumran. And then I haven't really seen Enoch mentioned in regard to Christian scripture and Christian thought. I haven't really seen this before, so this book is really quite original, really quite different in the way that it actually covers a lot of ground. And Tobias Churton, the author, is starting to become a bit of an expert on Enoch now. And then the last chapter, again, is really tying up the further Enochian connection with the New Testament and some of the stories of the Christian Gospels with Jesus. So as I was saying, there's a really great timeline in here, which is very useful at the back of the book. There's notes, there's a bibliography, there's an index, there's great photos. I think for me, this is the best book tying in all of this information that I have ever seen, and I just think it's great. Like, for example, I'll give you a bit of an example here. He covers people who studied the Book of Enoch, and also people who made connections between scripture, parts of the scripture in the Book of Enoch with the Christian Gospels. And he actually gives examples of parallels. I haven't really seen that before either. And, you can have a look at these connections, and, this is including this is the Gospels, the Book of Revelation. This book, as I was saying, I think it's one of the best books about the Book of Enoch. It's called the Books of Enoch Revealed, the books plural, because it's talking about books 1, 2, and 3. But I just think this book is it's a great book because it's all about the Book of Enoch all in one book. But tying in quite a wide history timeline. And it's, as I was saying, there's aspects of the Book of Enoch in relation to different parts of history and different figures in history and the New Testament scriptures. There's things in here that I haven't seen before. So I think this book is well researched, really quite well researched, and it's just so interesting. And I think it's good to see this from a wider perspective, because most books about Enoch are mainly in regard to magic and Hermeticism. So it's really good to see a wider research on different parts of history, and also the connection with scriptures as well. So I just think this book is really worthwhile for people who are interested. And I'm really glad that I have got this book, and it's even a great reference book as well. But for people who would really like to know a lot more about the books of Enoch and would like to know why it is quite remarkable and the relevance of the Book of Enoch, I think this is the best book about the whole topic of Enoch and the Book of Enoch. So I wanted to talk about this book today, and I wanted to talk about what is in the book, but there is a lot in the book. It's actually covering quite a wide part of history. It's just so well researched, and it's just really interesting to read. So I just wanted to talk about this today for people who are interested in getting the book. And yes, I do recommend the book for all the reasons that I've mentioned. And I'll put some details below the video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.